meeting, the February meeting of the Maine Recovery Council. Thank you for the council members that are here. And I also want to welcome the audience that is out on Zoom listening in, and note that we're very grateful that you take an interest and listen in on our work. I want to take a couple moments to just say a couple things as a chair. I just want to say thank you to all the council members in the past month and a half. You've really doubled up on what we do for committee work and trying to move forward. And it hasn't been easy. We've had a couple steps backwards, but I want to congratulate on the fact that we may step back, but we move forward. We went in easily Plan A didn't work, so we switched to Plan B, which is very nice. And I also particularly want to thank Ben for the work that he's done, and you'll see later how he has worked out that Plan A didn't work, and now we're going to go Plan B. And I'm very appreciative of that extra work because I know he has a busy job. And I also want to say to Joe Everett, thank you for chairing the programs committee because it has not been easy. And we've doubled up on meetings and you have managed to do that. And again, we're moving forward. So I just want to take that time to say how grateful I am. I was going to take the time, but she's not here. It's Courtney's birthday today. So if you see Courtney, make sure you wish her a happy birthday. It is her birthday today. I want to share with you that our agenda is slightly changed. We were going to have a presentation today on the prevention subgroup idea from Scott Gagnon, but unfortunately Scott's dad passed away. So we wish his family condolences, and he is on bereavement leave and has asked that he appear for the March meeting, and so we'll invite him back for the March meeting, but his father has passed away, and he called me on that earlier this week. So condolences to his family. So the meeting will start out with reviewing the minutes. We'll have a report, and I put our recovery council coordinator up front because when I put her at the bottom of the meeting, somehow she never gets to speak. So we moved her to the top so that she has a few minutes to talk with us. Then we're going to talk about the governance committee and the work that we did there. Then we're going to do an election for the vice chair. Then we're going to appoint people. I have the list of appointments to committees. I am going to take a little bit of time where the presentation was to suggest a guest we invite to our next meeting. Then we're going to do reports from the program and grants, finance committee, and I don't know if you have any other business that you want to add to this meeting. If not, okay. And Courtney, we just wished you all a happy birthday.
Can I just add at the bottom of it, if we could perhaps have other agenda items for future meetings if people wanted to put them in? I know we can't really suggest agenda items outside of public meetings, so it would be nice to have a little spot where we just, future agenda meeting area would be great.
All right, so at the end of the meeting, we'll talk about things that we'd like to be brought forward. Excellent. All right, so we will start the meeting up for those, if we could go quickly around the room to introduce ourselves so people on Zoom know who's in the room. And again, I ask that people speak up so people can hear. Can you start, Miles?
Yes, hi, my name is Miles Willett. I'm a person who is affected by the opioid crisis in long-term recovery and a clinical supervisor at an outpatient treatment facility.
Hey everyone. I'm Joe Everett, the President and CEO of the Opportunity Alliance in South Portland.
Good afternoon, I'm Lydia Crafts. I serve House District 46 in the Maine Legislature.
Hi, I'm Todd Brackett. I'm the Sheriff in Lincoln County.
Betsy Fitzgerald, representing regional interests.
Mary Coyne, the Council Coordinator.
Pat Kimball, Advocate and Chair of the Board.
Brendan O'Neill, Attorney General's Office.
Haley Tranco with the Attorney General's Office.
Benjamin Mann, Deputy Commissioner of Finance, Department of Health and Human Services.
And Liz Blackwell-Moore, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Public Health from Maine County Public Health Department.
Hello everybody, my name is Courtney Gary Allen. I'm the Organizing Director of the Maine Recovery Advocacy Project, or MERAP for short. I am also a person with living experience of substance use, and today is my birthday, and it is also 9 years ago today I checked myself into detox for the last time, and also my children were removed from my custody. I have since regained custody of my children, but so a person with lived experience of the child protective system as well, which I don't often share publicly, so.
Thank you, Gordon.
Gordon Smith, I'm the State's Director of Opioid Response in Governor Mills' office.
Paul Vinsel, addiction medicine physician, Tri-County Mental Health Services.
Bruce Naughton, Maine Reentry Network, person in long-term recovery and a person who lives with mental health challenges.
Thank you all. Thank you. All right, the first item. We got Zoom, that's right. Eric.
Hi there, Eric Small, Stafford Police
Oh,
Department.
you're muted, Eric. Or
Eric,
maybe,
you're muted.
maybe you're not, just kidding.
We'll go next. Kina Thacker, our infectious disease addiction medicine doc in Portland.
Thank you.
Ella Capon with the Attorney General's office.
Thanks, Ella. Eric? Now he's frozen. Okay. Eric Small is with us, so thank you, Eric.
Hey, yeah, Eric Small. Can you guys hear me okay today?
We can now, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Eric Small, Stafford Police Department.
Thank you. Minutes. The next item on the agenda is minutes. You all have them to review. If you have any questions, if not, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve minutes.
Seconded.
It's moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the minutes? If not, Haley, could you?
Yeah, was that Courtney and Paul?
Yeah.
Me and Gordon.
Oh, just kidding.
Can you take a roll for me, please?
Yes. And Liz Blackmore?
Yes.
Todd Brackett?
Yes.
Lydia Krause?
Yes.
Joe Everett?
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen?
Yes.
Pat Kimball?
Yes.
Ben Mann?
Yes.
Bruce Naughton?
Yes.
Miles Alette?
Yes.
Eric Small?
Yes.
Gordon Smith?
Yes.
Kina Thacker?
Yes.
Chastity Toole?
For what?
We're approving the minutes.
Yes.
Paul Vinsel?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, unanimous motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is Recovery Council Coordinator's Report. Given her 15 minutes. Go for it, Mary. Just so the council knows, Mary, I can't say enough of the work that she's been doing so far, and her and I talk about 45 minutes to an hour once a week, just to make sure that she's got the message from what the council is looking for and moving along and giving her support in the work that she's doing. So, but she's doing a great job, so thank you, Mary.
All right, I'll start. This is my first real coordinator report, and I've talked about, again, just giving everyone an overview of what I've been working on. So that's really the purpose of the report, and to provide, a brief overview of how I followed up on work since the last council meeting, and then to summarize the status of projects and deliverables, any progress we've made, and then questions that I may have for you all, and what next steps, from my perspective, look like. Any questions that you have or things you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to do that. So a big focus of what I've been working on the past month is administering the funds that have been awarded and approved by the council. Then we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but it's, the process is going to look a little bit different than we were initially anticipating. So over the past month, we've had a couple meetings with state partners, including DHHS, the Beach, and CDC, discuss what the administration of the council funds would look like if we were to go through the existing state channels. Ben's done a lot of work with his team internally, not only to gather information around what this looks like, but also to set up meetings and do a lot of the administrative side. So thank you, Ben. So it's, and again, then we'll talk more about this, but there's a couple different options for us moving forward. We've discussed what implications the MOU has on the actual funding process, and then again, what parts of the state procurement and contracting process, if the council were to go through those channels, we might be limited by or might provide opportunities for us. So we weighed many of those pros and cons. And then we also talked about what it would look like to administer council contracts and to create and draft those. A lot of our conversations really revolved around the SSP funding. So I've been working with the project manager over at the CDC who manages the SSP contracts and have drafted amendment language. So we'll adapt that to then translate it to the new contracts that the council will administer. And so I'll work with Brendan to do that. But essentially what happened is if the council were to use the existing state contracts, we wouldn't be able to provide the funding in the way that it was voted on and we want to allocate it. We may also run into issues downstream around the use of the funds if they're not in line with federal and state regulations. So I'm feeling confident that this is the best path forward for the council and also presents us a good opportunity for contracting in the future and what that looks like if we are to put out grants and all of that and we want to use processes that are independent of the state. I've also been working, as the Grant and Program Committee knows, with Peter L. Fogg Foundation and the Maine Youth Action Network. They gave great presentations yesterday around their proposed use of the funding. And I thought they were, really great presentations, and I appreciate and was able to witness all the time and effort they put into that. So that was really wonderful. And so the next step there will be to begin the contract negotiations with them. So I'll meet with both of their teams. And similar to the SSPs, we'll administer our own contracts, which was the plan initially because not both organizations have state contracts to amend. So I'll begin those discussions with them and hopefully within the next month have a draft what that could look like. For the direct family funding, I've met with the director of the Office for Family Independence, Ian Yap, hope I'm pronouncing that right, to talk about the opportunity to use their process and their department to help us administer the funds through the CAP agencies. I am still in discussions with him around what that will look like. I really want to just make sure they have the capability internally to do that and that this funding would be able to go to the families who need it most if we were to use their services and partner with them. So I'm in discussions with them still. Pat and I also met with the director of PENQUIS, which is a community action agency. They do some work with individuals and families in Nompscot, Scotticus, and Knox. So it's great to learn a little bit about what they're doing as a CAP agency, and then again hear about how our funds would impact their programs. So I'll continue to work again with them to figure out the best way to administer the direct family funding. I've worked with the committee and then also Gordon as well to access state contracts for the detox beds and the recovery center. Ben, again, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we're going to look at administering council contracts that are very similar to the state with the opportunity for potential oversight and partnership with the state in the long run. I know we've talked about sustainability as being a huge piece for those. So I believe those will go forward as independent contracts, but again, we'll stay closely partnered with the state to make sure we're doing that in the best way possible. I've also been working largely with Ella around grant applications. So what community grants would look like. We've received a lot of applications, as everyone knows, and so we're looking at standardizing that process and looking at different ways that can be administered. Done a lot of research on how other states are doing that and talked to a couple administrators to see if they have any thoughts or advice for us and how to do that most effectively. So that's been a big part of my work. And then again, supporting the committees with what they need and anything else. I met with a couple of community partners, a couple of public health agencies, met with another subdivision to just hear a little bit more around their needs and how the council can best support them. So I'll continue to do that back gathering and we'll move forward. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions? Comments from Mary?
Thank you.
She keeps busy.
Yeah, I think that you're handing out kudos. I think, Mary, you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate all that you do for our committee, and you're working really hard and moving a lot of work through some tough canals.
It's been a learning process, for sure. Thank you.
So, any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mary, for your work. And see, we move you up front, we get you in. All right, governance committee. So the governance committee met on the 31st, and our role really was to discuss the vice chair position and really look at the bylaws and to make sure that we got to that process. And in that, there was a recommendation that, which I'll say in a minute from that meeting, but first of all, what we discovered was we want to make some changes in the bylaws in order to clean up, really clean up, bad word, really straighten up or put into order how we see particularly officers running in our meetings and how they are. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brendan, who changed the language in the bylaws and can explain it better, and then I will get to the vice chair position. But I think first we'll do the bylaw changes.
Just to keep it as short as possible, the document I circulated today has one additional change to the two changes in the document that was circulated yesterday. In general, the changes to the bylaws are really intended to address the circumstance of what to do when there's a vacancy in the position of an officer of the council. And in a nutshell, the governance committee, as you know, already has the role of soliciting and submitting recommendations to the council for election of officers at the annual meeting. But it was silent on what to do outside of that moment. So if after the annual meeting there's a vacancy in the officer position, the bylaws were silent about that. And so the amendment is intended to address that. And it simply says, in the event of a vacancy, the governance committee has that same role of developing the recommendations and submitting nominees to the council for that officer position. And the language says, until either the vacancy is filled or the council votes to leave the office vacant until the next annual meeting. You can see that change in the bylaws on page 7. So that's intended to add some additional structure to the issue of what happens if after the annual meeting there's still a vacancy in the officer position. The governance committee just had a discussion about how to address the issue in this particular case of there being, there have been votes to fill the vice chair position. None of those votes have reached consensus. And as I explained at the time, the council had options to go forward, which included it could consider nominations of other candidates to be considered for vice chair. As part of the discussion, it was also talked about, could there be co-vice chairs? And under the bylaws, the council has the authority to create additional, or as it says, such other officers as the council may from time to time designate. So as I understand it, the governance committee, rather than consider additional candidates for vice chair, determined to use its authority to create additional officers to effectively create for this particular term the position of co-vice chairs. So there would be two vice chairs, and the council would have to vote on that here. Today is the proposal. And the council also has the obligation to determine, to basically define the powers and duties of the co-vice chairs. And so that, as I understand it, was the discussion. There are two other kind of housekeeping changes to the bylaws. On page 3, there's, on the draft I circulated today, there's some language that I'm proposing to strike in section 3.2 to make it clear that a council member's term is the term under which they're appointed under the MOU. The language that we're proposing to strike would create a potential ambiguity that appointed council members would stay in office until a new council member is appointed. And that would be contrary to, the council member's term could end, there might not be new council members by that time. And under the MOU, the existing council members would no longer be council members. So there would be, this change is intended to clear up that conflict. Also on page 4 in section 4.6, we're proposing to strike language that refers to my previous understanding of FOA's requirements for public meetings being tied to 3 or more members. As we've discussed, I have what I think is a more appropriate understanding of FOA's public meetings requirements that are not tied to a specific number of council members. So with the intent of trying to keep it short, I'm happy to answer questions.
Ben?
So does the edit of section 4.6 formally preclude us from meeting with any other council member outside of a public hearing?
I don't think so.
Or can you just reiterate why we're making that change then?
Yeah, so my thinking is that this language would require public notice if there's a meeting of 3 or more council members. My understanding of FOA is more accurately that a public notice is required of a meeting of a public body where it's engaging in deliberations about the transacting of its business. And so that could be, if 2 council members are getting together and they're making deliberative decisions, that really ought to happen at a public meeting.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Ben?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, although I think the answer to my first question is yes.
Right, that's what I was at. It's concerning.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
So, looking at section 4.8, I was going to ask what constitutes a meeting, right? So, I don't see how if I read 4.8 correctly, I don't see how the council can conduct business and make any decisions if we don't have a quorum. 2 or 3 people is not a quorum, right? So going back to I don't want to beat a dead horse, but going back to the statute that we looked at last meeting, I just think it's unfortunate if we can't continue to have dialogue about issues that we're working on at the committee level or whatever. I mean, I agree, we should not be deliberately trying to hide anything.
Correct.
But a lot of work gets done that way, and I fear that it's gonna slow us down if we feel like we're stifled and we can't do some of that work.
There's no doubt that it is cumbersome and it creates a lot of friction to the council moving forward. Let me try to address, so Ben, can you articulate, and maybe everyone else has seen this and I'm just not, can you articulate what you're seeing in 4.6?
I think what we've been discussing is that if we don't have 3 or more council members in a meeting, we are okay to have discussions, basically. I was asking if we strike that clause in 4.6, this is sort of codifying that whenever there's more than one council member talking to another council member, we shouldn't be discussing any business of the council. Which I wasn't sure if there was a final opinion on that or not, but this seems like it's sort of codifying that we should not be discussing council business with anyone else outside of a public hearing.
So, a couple of things. I feel very comfortable with the idea that the better reading of that statute in FOA is to move away from the idea that it's 3 or more persons constitutes a public meeting. And so, I'm interested in not having language in the bylaws that suggests that that's the rule. The council could leave this language in to have its own rule that you could have 3 or more, that you have to notice meetings of 3 or more council members. But I want to be clear that FOA has, I think, a broader requirement that even if a couple of council members get together outside of a meeting, that's 2 council members, and are making decisions that are deliberative and affect the business of the council, say they're saying, we're going to make a choice, the 2 of us, to vote a particular way on the council's business. That kind of discussion, I'm trying to be clear with the council, is probably best had in a public meeting. If the council members are engaging in just sort of fact-finding or, trying to, as that work's being, going on now, that, I think the council members can come back to the council and report on that work. But I'm trying to move away from this kind of rigid interpretation of 3 or more members.
So, Courtney, so here's my example. Say, for instance, we know we're going to talk about something to do with prevention in a meeting. It's on the thing. And I know Liz has an expertise in it. So I call Liz up and I say, Liz, this proposal or this thing, I don't really understand it. Can you explain how that works? That's okay to do that. I'm not trying to sway a vote. We're not trying to do anything. I'm literally just trying to say something is going to be coming before the council and I don't really understand it. Can you explain it to me? So she explains it to me. I say, thank you very much. Is that okay to do?
I think that kind of discussion is best had in a public meeting.
Oh, okay. Courtney?
Brendan, help me understand. This is a massive shift in FOIA recommendations that I've ever had in a public body. And I serve on city council, I work in the legislature every day. People have these conversations every single day. In every other body, it's always more than 3 constitutes a public meeting. So I guess I need help understanding how we got there and who is the final authority on this matter.
So the courts are the final authority. Courts have, I haven't seen a case that weighs in directly on this point. As you know, I've consulted with the FOA ombudsman, who's met with this group. I've also consulted with attorneys in our office. I do, and I'm happy, I have the statute here, I'm happy to talk about the statute. Why don't I make the offer of inviting the FOA, having a conversation with the FOA
I think this type of strict interpretation of the FOIA upends politics in Maine, if this is true, because, the legislature, they talk to each other all the time. I call my city council fellows all the time to talk through a vote. I think that's fine if that is the lay of the law. I believe, obviously, very deeply in the law. but the interpretation is just something I've never heard before.
And certainly at the last time this was discussed, I did commit to, you know, engaging further on this issue to try to, you know, provide, you know, more feedback to the council on this. So, you know, that obligation is still standing.
So to be clear, this has not happened, and Betsy, I'm using you as a neutral party here. I cannot call Betsy and say, Betsy, on next Tuesday's meeting, this funding thing is up for debate or conversation. How are you going to vote?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would probably not be a great conversation to have.
Okay,
That's
thank
what
you.
I think.
How about, I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was just gonna, I mean, I think in the last meeting, we compared these same FOA requirements to the legislature, and the legislature routinely in every public hearing, or many public hearings, will have corner caucuses where there could be a quorum actually in corner caucus discussing how they are specifically going to vote on a particular issue. And that is done in, like, they recess to corner caucuses and they come back and take a vote so that they can organize themselves on how they want to vote. And I mean, I think the voting thing is a Representative, you have other things to add, or if I mischaracterize that at all, but that's just my observation as someone also at the legislature from time to time. So I do think just trying to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable and being transparent, but also not hampering the business that we need to conduct is a balance that we need to strike here.
Thank you, Ben. Todd? Did you have more to add?
No, I think that sums it up right.
So I think we should take, what Brendan's suggestion is have somebody here at our next meeting to be able to ask specific questions and get an educational session about what we cannot do, and then follow suit. So my question is, at this point, are you comfortable, Courtney?
I would like to table that amendment to the bylaws until further notice.
So that one particular one with the 3,
4.6.
the other 2, you'll go through it? Is your motion that you will accept the amendments to the bylaws for section 4.6 and section 6.4 as recommended, but table the other one?
3.2.
Yeah, so my motion is to accept the amendments in Article 3, council members, section 3.2, and
6.4.
in Article 6.4, accept those edits and to table the edits in section 4.6 until further notice.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the bylaw change? Vote. All right, will you call a roll, please?
Liz Blackmore,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
No.
Lydia Krebs,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Barry Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yeah, I guess.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Nauman,
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
No.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Keena Thacker,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vincel,
Yes.
13-2.
Okay. Thank you, motion carries. Thank you very much, and we'll add that to our agenda for next time. So with that done, the governance committee had a long discussion about the vice chair position and determined after a long discussion that we, at this point, would recommend to the council that we place before you in nomination 2 vice chairs with determining and dividing up the duties. And this is only a recommendation for 1 year. Actually, the motion went that the motion is to create a two-person vice chair configuration, noting the increase in the workload that the chair currently manages and the fact that the work will only increase as the council's responsibilities expands. And that was a 4-to-1 vote to make that recommendation. So we're recommending to this committee that we put before you 2 people to serve as co-vice chair. Is there any discussion on that?
Is that the 2 folks that were nominated?
No,
before,
it's not. Would you like to know who the nominees are?
Yes.
Okay, so Eric graciously has withdrawn his name from the nomination process. So the 2 names that will come before you are Courtney and Bruce.
I don't mean to put Eric on the spot, probably his decision is final, but I got the impression that Eric made that decision based on the vote, the conversation, my words, the controversy at the time. Now that that's no longer the case, does Eric still feel the same way about withdrawing his name? He probably does. You probably already had that conversation, but I just like to get that.
Eric, would you please like to respond to Todd?
Yes, of course. We talked about this in subcommittee, and I chose to withdraw given seemed really important to the people that they had somebody with lived experience, and that's not me. And I just don't want to hold this up anymore. And I have complete faith in both of those 2 people. So that's it. Thank you.
So can I just refer to Brandon's presentation of the bylaws and Pat, your point about sort of a 1 year. I think it is really, I like the idea of sort of limiting the timeline, because I think as we evolve, I think that we'll see what's really needed.
Correct.
And in this, I'm not interested in doing this right now, but I think committee chairs need to be considered to be at the executive, like a normal board. So if the committee chair is a chair, and the governance chair, and et cetera, I think there's a lot to look at over the 15-year, 20-year life of the council. I know from your life, so I think it's a great idea to just keep it flowing so that the conversation goes.
Yeah, I think, as again, we're evolving. We are a new entity. We don't really know. So be a lot of changes, but for right now, that was the discussion that the governance committee had that for 1 year, and that the 2 co-chairs would meet with the chair and look at how they're going to divide up the duties of that and how that will flow for the next year.
Great.
Gordon?
We spent a couple hours in the governance committee and had a really excellent discussion, I thought, but there's a question that I probably wasn't paying enough attention. Would we proceed today on the basis of this is really a question for Brendan. We proceed under Article 5, Section 5.2, that the council may appoint such other officers as it shall be necessary, so that we could have these 2 vice chairs without without having to amend the bylaws, Section 5.5, which references the vice chair. Is that what we're intending to do?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as I expressed at the time, I don't see a need to amend the bylaws to create co-vice chairs. I think you can just do it just for this term limited purpose.
Any other questions?
I see.
Eric?
Yeah, a caveat to my last statement was, and I said this in the subcommittee meeting, was that I didn't personally necessarily think this was the right way to go. I thought maybe we needed to ask other council members if they would be interested. Maybe neither Courtney or I was the right choice in the moment. I just wanted to also let the sheriff know that as well, since he had questions about it. This was kind of a I don't know, a plan B, in my opinion, given the fact that Pat has so much work to do, and 2 people helping her out right now would be, I think, beneficial to the group as a whole. So I did express my concern where there might be people sitting in the room and maybe they have interest now to be nominated, and they haven't been given that opportunity, given this is a new situation. So I'll leave that to Pat, how she thinks that should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. It's up to the council if they want that. But I believe that if we don't go forward according to the bylaws that you just approved, I think then it goes back again to the governance committee. So if anyone is interested in putting their name in nomination, we will then, the governance committee will then bring that name back, and then we'll vote on it again next meeting. I think that's the way that has to go.
I also have an additional question for Brandon, along the lines of what Gordon said. Does this mean that we're going to appoint a vice chair and then that the authority is there to make another officer? So are these separate votes, or would these be one vote as a pair?
So the executive committee, the way it stands, and you'll see in the committees, and you didn't get the full list because I just did it. We will be electing 2 at-large for the executive committee. And my nominations for that, because that's in the bylaws, the chair makes the nominations for the 2 at-large, and the 2 at-large is one you, Eric, and the other is Gordon. So those 2 members will be added to the executive committee.
My question was more around the vice chair position. Are those going to be voted together, or are they going to be separate? I'm just trying to understand the bylaws a little bit. You have the authority to make another officer. Does that mean you elect the vice chair as standalone, maybe one person by themselves, and then a second person with the second vice chair position? Am I making sense?
Yes, I think the council could do it either way. You could create, the co-vice chair position, 2 co-vice chairs, and elect the 2 vice chairs together, or you could elect, personally, I think that's the cleaner way to do it. You could, I think, also elect one person as vice chair and then have a separate vote to create the co-vice chair position and the second person in that position.
Yes. Okay, great. Because my concern was if somebody else wanted to participate as the second vice chair, knowing that the work is going to be split between 2 people, certainly giving those people the opportunity to raise their hand and say they'd be interested, knowing that it's Courtney and Bruce.
I'm not interested, but when it comes time to figure out the roles for each person, is it possible that if the chair can't be in person and they're on Zoom, okay.
The chair will appoint one of the co-chairs to chair the meeting, it to be in person, because we know that that's not good. And again, I was sick in December and my husband was sick in January. So that was the intent, that one of them can be, again, I could be on Zoom, but it's near impossible to do it via Zoom when you're all here. And so I would appoint one of the 2 to take on that role.
Is it possible before we vote to just ask if anybody else is interested in, so that there's not an air that, oh, well, somebody didn't have an opportunity? Can we just ask whether there's anybody that would like to also be considered for one of these 2 positions that we're about to vote on, and then we'll know the answer to that.
So Gordon has a question on the floor that says, is anyone else interested in being in one of the co-chair VP positions?
Seeing none.
We're all not making eye contact with you.
So seeing none, we spent a lot of time on this, and I would move to elect both at the same time, and I would move that proceeding partly under Article 5, Section 5.2, that we, for the current time period until the next election, have 2 co-vice chairs and I'm nominating Courtney Gary-Allen and Bruce Norton for those positions.
Second. It's been moved in second. I dare make this statement, but I have to. Is there any other further discussion on this?
No.
That's a no. Okay, do I hear a roll?
Eric has his
Oh,
hand up.
Eric, is your hand
No,
up?
no, sorry. No, I gotta put my hand down. Sorry.
Put it down. Call a roll, please. Thank you.
Liz Blackwell Ward.
Yes.
Todd Brackett.
Yes.
Lydia Crafts.
Yes.
Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen.
Yes.
Pat Kimball.
Yes.
Ben Mann.
Yes.
Bruce Naughton.
Yay.
Miles Willett.
Yes.
You sure?
Eric Small.
Yes.
Gordon Smith.
They're very enthusiastic, yes.
Keena Thackrar.
Yes.
Chastity Toole.
Yes.
Paul Vinsel.
Yes.
Unanimously filled your vice chair spot.
Thank you. On to January. No, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be able to serve with you all. All right, so the next thing is that according to the bylaws that the chair has to put together a list of committees. You have that list with you. The only changes that I made in it since it's gone out is that I am recommending that the 2 at-large positions, one be Eric Small and one be Gordon Smith, that they be added to that list, and I've spoken with both of them and they agreed to serve in that capacity at large. And so I'm looking for conversation and a vote on the committees.
I want to just make a motion.
That would be great.
Done.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't have the list in front of me. This is the, I'm happy to serve as an at-large member, but the executive committee, the language in the bylaws talks about the executive committee being the officers and talks about a vice chair.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and you have the ability to appoint 3 at-large members.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the motion should make clear that you're including in the executive committee both the individuals that are serving as vice chairs, and technically under that provision, one might need to be considered the first at-large member,
Mm-hmm.
and then Eric and myself. Is that clear, Brandon?
Yes.
I would, during the time that there are co-vice chairs, I would read the bylaws to include both.
Thank you.
So I think from my perspective, I would not suggest that the co-vice chairs need to take up one of the at-large positions.
So technically, there would be one more at-large.
Mm-hmm. They still have one more to go.
We need that, okay, thank you. I think it's been moved.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Move to do both together. Or not?
We're doing all
Eric
that.
and Gordon.
And the other ones were already voted on, so we just have to vote. Any other discussion? Been moved and seconded? If not, can you call a roll, please?
Liz Blackwell.
I'm sorry, what am I voting on?
To
The
elect.
committee appointments,
All of them.
all of them,
Okay.
Oh,
with the 2 at-large included in that.
oh, okay. Sorry.
You mean the
Wait.
executive?
What's the motion? Can someone just say the motion?
So the motion is that we accept
My motion was to accept all of the recommendations for these committees.
which includes the 2 at-large. The other offices have already been elected.
And who seconded it?
I did.
Gordon?
Thank you.
So we're approving this whole list?
Yep.
Okay.
Liz Blackwell.
Yes.
Todd Brackett.
Yes.
Lydia Crafts.
Yes.
Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen.
Yes.
Pat Kimball.
Yes.
Ben Mann.
Yes.
Bruce Naughton.
Yes.
Miles Willett.
Yes.
Eric Small.
Yes.
Gordon Smith.
Yes.
Keena Thackrar.
Yes.
Chastity Toole.
Yes.
Paul Vinsel.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. All right, so I want to take just a few minutes. I don't want to spend a lot of time. But this is where we had a presentation, but that's going to be next month. I actually had a really good conversation with Greg Payne from the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and Future. And he's the current senior advisor for the housing policy in the Governor's office. And he has asked if he can have some time to talk about low barrier shelters with us. and to talk a little bit about the governor's plan, and if the council has any interest in being part of that and how that works. Considering if we look at data, the amount of people who are experiencing drug overdoses and the amount of people who are currently unhoused, who may have a substance use disorder, mental health, is sort of at times overwhelming. I think it would be in the best interest of the council to really hear from somebody about the low barrier shelters and what the governor's plan is in moving forward, and how in any way we could be supportive of that. And so he has asked if he can come to a meeting and just share with him the work that he's doing with low barrier shelters. Courtney?
I'm happy to hear from Greg Payne, a phenomenal human being, and the work that they're doing on low barrier shelters is wonderful work. And also, if this is a funding request, that's going to make me pretty concerned, because we've told everybody else that we're not accepting funding requests until we have an open application process. So I'm personally going to be voting against any funding request that comes across me at this point until we have an application process. Nothing against, I love low barrier shelters, I love this, I love that, I love that, but that's like my line personally right now.
Thank you, Courtney.
I would agree with Courtney on that. 100% agree with her.
Greg is very, really smart and knows this work inside and out, so I think I'm with you, Courtney. I don't think, they have the group has put a request forward. I think Greg it'll be a real learning opportunity, I think, if we hear from Greg. I would just say, is there someone else in that world that we would add to Greg? Is there another person is there other pieces of the work do we feel like Greg can represent? I mean, I think he can, but I think maybe, sorry.
No, you're still talking.
No, I'm all set.
I guess I have like a process question. I feel like we came up with short-term priorities that we wanted to fund in the immediate. And it feels like now we're doing a process where we're trying to figure out how we create an application process and a contracting process. It feels like we need to merge these things a little bit with like have we decided on our funding priorities for when we get that contracting up for additional requests? Like, I know there's been some talk of wanting to do $50,000 grants for small things, but it feels like we haven't decided as a group, like what are our key we decided short term, but not kind of this medium term of what the next thing is. And so while I think obviously Greg has amazing things to share, and there might be lots of people that we want to hear from, do we want to hear from people who are related to our priorities that we chose, so that we're then saying we want to have, like, when we get our contracting up and we have an application ready, that we're taking in applications and requests that are on those priorities? Because I was just looking up today, in 2017, the cost of substance use disorder and opioid use disorder and overdoses cost this state of Maine, $6 billion. We are gonna get like billions of dollars worth of requests, and how are we gonna shift through those unless we have a priority of what we want because there's so much need, and we're just gonna be overwhelmed by that. Like, having some clear things that we think this body should fund that's different, maybe different or similar to the state, whatever we decide, I think is like necessary. And so if we're thinking about future people to come, one recommendation, and maybe you have a thought on this, Pat, was having folks from Wabanaki come and speak to us on what they're funding, what they're currently getting, and what their future funding needs are. There's emergency shelter, but I'm sure we had priorities. Do you want to spend time coming up with what are, let's get clear on those so that then we can fund stuff?
So thank you. I see Eric's up. I will just make one comment. One of the highest vote getters when we did our priority list was low barrier shelters. So that was indicated by the council that there is. I will take Eric. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'm going to take a quick consensus. I can tell you that I think that one of the biggest crises that cities are seeing is in regards of housing. I think it would be, in me, it's just my opinion, I'm one voting member. I think having somebody come here to share with them the governor's plan about what they intend to do with low barrier shelters and how to look at that would be a benefit, but I in one vote, and I will vote, we will vote to see if they'll come, because that's how we do things here with a consensus. But again, Greg asked me, I had a conversation with him, had conversations with lots of people, but this one seemed to, again, was on our priority, I got 4 votes, which is most of the things that we funded didn't even have 4 votes. So I just wanted to point that out. I have it here in front of me. I'm going to take a question from Eric and then Gordon.
I don't have a question, just a statement, and I referred back to this before a couple other times, is that we have several letters that we've received requesting funds. I want to make sure that all those people who would probably love to come before us and tell us why they running all these awesome programs, why are we taking this one and not all the other ones as well? So I just agree with Courtney 100%. It can't be a funding request, nor I'm not even sure if people should be coming before us, because essentially I'm sure that's what their, obviously their ultimate goal is, to receive some funding. So it's hard to say it's not a funding request. Why would you come see us? So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Gordon.
Well, I think we should perhaps talk about what's the timing, and work with our staff on what's the timing for the application. And if the application really is important for those of you who don't want really to have anybody come in and make a presentation until there's an open application process, but let's make sure there is one very, very soon. Secondly, we could entertain some informational sessions that do not involve an ask. Now, in fact, as I recall, we have a communication from the shelters asking for $4.1 million. But Greg could do a presentation on emergency shelters without, we already have the ask from different parties. But thirdly, and this would only perhaps be obvious to Representative Crafts, I believe that the legislature will be interested in doing some of this. But the supplemental budget has not yet been presented. I think it's due to perhaps be presented to the legislature next week, I hear. So so I just wanted to throw that into the mix, is that, I think these shelters are going to close. They have no funding. I think the legislature has some money. They may well make this a priority, and I don't even know how much the governor's going to propose. So I just wanted for you to know that part of the process.
I would just add that I don't know a lot. I don't have a lot of experience with shelters. We don't have a shelter in Lincoln County. My experience is oftentimes we don't have room. We'll look for something. So I would like to learn more about low barrier shelters compared to other shelters. So aside from the funding piece, which I don't disagree with that, I would like to learn.
Thank you.
I also think that if Greg Payne is going to spend time with us, it would be worth asking him to address housing first. Because the money that the legislature committed in a funding stream through the real estate transfer tax becomes available, but not till July 1st. And housing first is going to be, I think most of you have a working knowledge of what that means. But Greg's a housing expert, so I would just hope that we could take 5 minutes this time and say, how are we doing with that? Because that really is the best long-term strategy now with sustainable funding of getting people housed and then working on their health care. So.
Thank you. Courtney?
Thanks, Pat. I just want to say this for the record, because I don't know if we're actually going to vote on this, and I want to explain my vote before I take it. So I'm going to vote no, and here's why. Because sitting in front of me right now, I can see at least 5 requests for money and time, including but not limited from Access Direct, Ryan Page, Acadia Family Health Center, Be Driven, Tessa's House.
We've seen the emails, Gordon.
Yep,
They're public.
please don't cut me off, thank you. And the shelter that is in my city, right down the road. So the reason why I'm voting no is because we're not gonna invite all of these people to come present to us either, and I don't think it's fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just, so to Liz's process question and Pat, our conversations, I think sort of for me as the chair of the grants committee, I think we have to, into what's been conversation in the room, we have to figure out like what's our committee's role. So I kind of see it twofold. One, and I talk to Greg all the time, so I'll just disclose that because we talk about a lot of things. I think there's sort of content knowledge that we need to learn. So if this is a crisis, which it is, there's that piece. And then I would just ask the council to consider, and one of you over there mentioned earlier, like what do we want to talk about? At the end of yesterday's program meeting, we're like, what else? Okay, we've got $9 million allocated. What do you want to come to the committee? So I would ask that things start here, and I'm respectfully, if someone starts with me, I send it back over to Pat and Mary. But I think, like, could we talk about kind of what are the content areas we think we need to, like, obviously low barrier shelters, housing, but what else that might require sort of an expert guest? And then what needs to go forth? You know, our next couple of meetings are kind of full of the program grants committee, but after that, I think at least half the meeting every time should be focused on how are we moving forward? What else? Who are we gonna entertain like we did yesterday as guests to our meeting? So I would just say that for me, it's sort of like, what do we need to learn as it relates to our priorities and our communities? So just a thought.
Thank you. Thank you for clarification, Paul, and then Bruce.
It's not clear to me in this committee where we go if we have an idea of how we might fund one of our priorities or where we might put some money that's one of our big priorities. I don't know how, there's something I want to say as a thought and educate people on, but I don't know how to do it. Where would I put that?
So I believe that you could ask time here at the council meeting to put your thought process. If you thought it belonged with one of the committees, I would assume that you could do it that way because you're a member of the council, but you're also a member of the public. You're also there. So your ideas are just as important to all of us individually. So you can, we can, again, I hear both Joe and Liz making a comment that at the end of the meeting that we start adding things that we want to have included in our minutes and in our meetings. And so maybe we need to add a section in there for comments from council members so they can give ideas. Does anyone thought about this or that? And we can do that. I think it's a great idea that, again, you could put it towards, the end of the meeting, maybe the beginning, and sometimes our meetings go too long, but we can do that because certainly there's an expertise that's sitting around the table, and people have thoughts and ideas that could very well blossom into something that's life-changing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, and then Miles.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Joe. I mean, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive, that we can gain some knowledge and some education about, and knowing and understanding that most of our community challenges either intersecting in homeless situations or homeless shelters or jails, that getting more education can be helpful. But I don't think that precludes this need to identify what our next kind of priorities are. And I think Liz and Joe are on the same page on that part of it. So We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do both, and I've always enjoyed listening to Greg. I've always learned something every time I have a conversation with him, and learning more about, or having this committee and the people that are listening learn more about Housing First and learn more about the challenges in the community can be beneficial to all of us. And it gives us a basis of why we make the decisions that we do. More education is helpful.
Thanks.
Can I say one more thing?
You can.
Just one more thing. And I don't feel like that's a push for funding. If Greg comes here, that's not what this is. This is to educate us.
It's about low barrier shelters and the need, and it's part of our role is to fill gaps. Part of our role is to look where things are needed, and if he shares with us the work that we do, when we see things come across us, we can make those determinations because we know there's a need in what it is. Come on.
Two things. One, do we have a list of our voted priorities? And
It's on, I have it. Remember, were you here when Kim went around the room?
Stickers?
With the stickers?
I
That
believe
is.
so.
Yeah.
Is there any way, maybe we can get an email sent out to everyone, just so we have, like, just, for me anyway, it would also be on the forefront of my mind if I always have it, know where we're at. And the second thing, yes, it would be good for me personally to learn about the low barrier shelter. At the same time, if we have him coming in, maybe we could ask, I don't know if there's maybe like a Ron Springle or someone from our recovery residences, which I don't know how similar, to come and speak at the same time. If we're talking about one, I know that sustainability for a lot of these places, that they have been sustainable. So for me, I'd be interested in learning what the difference is, if we're going to talk about the low barrier shelter. But that's where I'm at.
Well, I think that's sort of, if I can, Miles, tell me if I'm interpreting it wrong, but I think part of what Joe said was maybe we should have like an educational session as part of our meeting on a regular basis. Like we were going to have, it was sort of a presentation, but the prevention group coming in here. And then if we had somebody come in and briefly discuss with us what low barrier shelters is, and then maybe depending on how the agenda went, we could look to see if recovery residencies, and again, we could pull in and get a consensus from the group what kind of things they'd like more information on, and do an educational session, and time limited, because again, we have a busy meeting, but this gets, everyone sits around the table, has a different knowledge base, and comes from a different path. The sheriff here, said, I don't know a lot about low barrier shelters, I'd like to learn, which helps us in the process of understanding when we determine where money comes. If somebody comes to us and says, I want money for a low barrier shelter versus Housing First, do I understand the difference of it and how that works with my community, how it is. But again, we all come from different paths. And so this way it gives knowledge base. I often use the example of I serve in the United Way and I review grants. The grants are reviewed by 100 people, volunteers, and often the volunteers will say, I'm reviewing a grant, I don't even know what it is. So they actually go on websites often and find out what is that and what kind of work they do, just so they can score the grant, so they know what work it is, not the particular program, but not even understanding what the work is. So again, it's up to the committee, but any other comment?
And then I just want to roll back to what Courtney was talking about an application process. Is that something that we could start figuring out with that list of priorities that we have? So we don't just have folks, not that it's wasting our time, but it takes a lot of time being here. And if folks are going to present that, it's pertinent to what our priorities are. But at the same time, like I said, I'd like to figure out an application process and how, because I'm just like everyone else, what's going on with the council, there's this, there's that, and, we don't have an application process, but people are coming to present, and we have allocated some money, so I just, in fairness for the community, I just think, I don't know how that works, but we should take a session soon, whether it's next meeting or the meeting after, to figure out this application process.
So that's in the hands of the Grants Committee, and Joe will talk about that later, but the Grants Committee is actively working on that application process, as well as Mary, and Ella is doing some research, and she's working with Mary. We know that that application process and that grant process is a priority, but the Grants Committee will work, and then they will bring their recommendations here to the full council.
I think there were two other topics that have come up before as needing some discussion and perhaps education before this one. Again, I think the homeless low-barrier shelters is a really important thing. But I think we also had on the table to talk through our 3% mandate of spending 3% on the school, specifically on special ed. And so I think, whether we take some time next time to have a conversation about are we having a school committee that's gonna work on some of that, some sort of conversation about that would be great. And then I also think we did have on the table having folks from the Wabanaki Nation come and speak to us about their settlement dollars and their needs. And I think we had approved, the grants and programs committee had all said that we all wanted that.
So we are working on that. Mary is currently working with the Department of Education and talking to people about understanding how the 3% works and how they're doing it. So when Mary has enough information gathered, that will be brought back here. Mary is also reaching out to Wabanaki to ask them some questions about where they are, and then she will bring her recommendation back to the committee. But that Mary is actively working on both of those issues.
I hesitate to this, but you made a statement that's not completely accurate. The notes reflect from that meeting that I took exception to this idea about meeting with Wabanaki, saying that I meet with them every 2 weeks with their federal partners. They have 230 employees. 6 years ago, they had 7. They have lots of resources. They're doing beautiful work, by the way. Beautiful work. And I'm sure that there's an appropriate time where I'd be embracing the notion of them doing an educated presentation about all the stuff they're doing. But if this is premised on, boy, they don't have any resources, well, you should see the resources they have.
It's not about whether they have resources or not, it's about what are they getting in opioid settlement dollars? What are they currently receiving from the tribal settlements, and what are their needs related to the opioid settlement dollars? This has nothing to do with whether they've gone and done incredibly hard work to raise funds through competitive processes. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having them come to discuss the opioid settlement dollars that they are receiving. And it would be within that context that we would invite them.
And again, Eric, I'll get you in just a second. And again, as I said, Mary is working on that.
Great.
And again, certainly we look at gaps and where gaps are. And so we will look at that, because that's a matter of collecting data to see where gaps are. And if that's a particular special population that has gaps, then the council should look at that. And again, we'll start this running list, and I think what I'm hearing from people is we'll do educational sessions periodically, but again, I'm going to have to time limit them because you have other business that comes before you. So, but I hear the two things, the Wabanaki, the school funding, when we think we have enough information to move forward with it, we will move forward with it. Eric, and then I can't read that, if somebody can read the comment.
Oh, I was gonna say, Eric, which document are you referring to?
The request that's before the council right now to come speak to the council. Was there a letter sent to us for that?
Not that I've seen.
No, okay.
No.
So my question around that was, and I kind of got lost in the weeds during the whole conversation. Is this around housing first, or was this around low barrier? And then Miles mentioned MAR, all three very different things. So could you just remind me what this was about?
So this is about a request from Greg, who is, I want to make sure I got his title right, he is the Senior Advisor on Housing Policy for the Governor. And he just asked if he could come speak to the group in regards to low barrier shelters and about the governor's plan. And so he just wanted to share with us where the state was going. And again, the council can decide. Thank you very much. We've got information. It was not a request, to my knowledge, about funding. It was to share with him what the governor had. And again, did the council, want to be part of that, or do we keep that in the back of our head that if the funding doesn't go through with the legislature, again, it's one of those things that would happen, but that's what that was about. So for the sake of time, I have two things. One is, I think I can get a general consensus. We want to take a little bit of time every meeting to do some education. And so I have a list. I have things like Housing First. We may be able to add, I have a list of the school funding, Wabanaki, recovery homes. So we have a running list going of what we have, but what's on the table for my conversation is, because people seem to feel very strongly with it, I'm going to ask for a vote, just a show of hands, if that's possible. It's not an official vote, but I want to make sure it's a consensus. Can I ask how many people would like to have Greg Payne come here to speak about low barrier shelters in Maine and what's going on? Can you count, Haley?
I'm gonna do the 14, no, 12, 14, yeah, okay.
14. Any opposed to that? I know that Courtney has already spoken that she was opposed, and Hina and Eric, so there's 3 are opposed.
No, they
had their hands up before.
Oh, they had their hands up before. Okay. Courtney, we just took a vote. You have an opportunity. It was just a show of hands about the low barrier shelter and coming here to speak. And you said you were voting no?
Oh, June, I wasn't here.
Okay. Well, the motion carries, and I will send Greg a message and see if he can come to the next meeting. And then I will get, sorry.
It's not related to the vote. I think we have data in this, Mary. I think we can draw from all the information we've learned around sort of the informational discussions needed and things that get brought to the program grants committee. And Mary has stepped out of the room, but I think we can pull out of all the data we have around people we want to hear from. And I think we have to hear pretty regularly from outside folks that really, have this expertise, like you said, Pat, that we don't, even if it's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And what's nice about the council meeting is that it's mostly in person. I found it was the Peter Alfond group were on Zoom. They were brilliant. I think it would have been so much better in person because they would have all participated more. So I think there is value to having a quick educational session, but I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. I think we have a lot of data on kind of what we've heard. So thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, I agree. I would just say if we can get those little, content updates, I think that would be great. I'm just looking at the list of priorities. And so, if you look at, Mar got the same number of votes as overdose prevention sites. So I think that we need to really, if we want education, I would just say, hopefully we think broadly and include things like overdose prevention sites, low barrier treatment in the hospitals, workforce. I have lots of thoughts on this. I don't know if we could just do a doodle poll, even based on the list of priorities, just to know what people need to hear more of. That's all.
We can do that. We can send out something. I can send out something about information gathering, about what people would like. In regard to, I know that BAR was one of the top vote getters or priorities that we had, and we are still in the process. That became overwhelming. And Mary has had some conversations with it, but it wasn't as easy as we thought. So it was one of those things, and rather than spend time with it, when we had allotted the 9 million that we did, we sort of passed that because it was getting too complicated. So, but Mary continues to work with the department on that one. But that's a great suggestion. We certainly can send out somewhat like a doodle poll or something to get some ideas as to what kind of people we will ask to come give us information as we make our decisions. Thank you. Anything else? All right, so. Ben.
Yeah, it was just a half raise. Just so I articulate what I heard, I think it sounds like we're going to carve out maybe a section of this council meeting every week going forward, a 15-minute presentation, 15 minutes of Q&A or something, and we can make a list of people. We're gonna make a list of topics, and then we're gonna have a discussion about who should present on those topics, I'm sure. So there's like work that we need to do to like line it all up, just so we have 12 months worth of presentations, basically. Okay.
That's the goal. Great, thank you for that. All right, committee meetings. Joe or Ben, who would like to go?
Ben, who was the
We're gonna go
rock
with the complicated one now.
He was a rock star yesterday, so Ben, you go.
Just for the council's awareness, the finance committee did not meet in January. However, we have a meeting set up in February and going forward. So there's, just wanted to give that update, but there was a couple times folks have alluded to the fact that there's a slight change in direction on how we're going to implement the syringe service funding for harm reduction services, as well as the recovery center of Piscataquis County that were both voted on at the December council meeting. So just by way of background, I have been working since I was put on this council to make sure that funding could flow from the recovery council to other places. I was operating under one impression, and when things got closer to implementation, the details got in the way slightly. So currently, my understanding from other parts of the state is that that departments, including DHHS, cannot accept funding from the Maine Recovery Council without amending the MOU or legislative approval. Neither of which are easy tasks. But and I will come back to legislative approval at the end here. But so we can put a pin in that for right now. I do think it's actually. I think this is going to work out better than it would have otherwise, though, because I think the second issue we were running into is that this council and many members of it have certain expectations about how the funding would go to certain providers, including syringe service providers, that would not be possible through state contracts. So, for one, state procurement rules require that the state reimburse for services already rendered. And I think I've heard many people in this meeting say that they want to provide funding upfront and not reimburse providers. So DHHS cannot do that. And even if we could, we can't amend the contracts we were going to amend because we can't have two different funding mechanisms in the same contract. So there's multiple layers here. But I've had conversations with many people, and I think we are going to, or at least my proposal to this council, and I think, and I've talked to the Program and Grants Committee as well, and others, that we would put in place contracts directly under the auspices of the Maine Recovery Council. So that requires different work from different people. I think there's going to be a bigger burden on OAG and making sure that they, those contracts can get drafted and put in place and then have proper oversight of those. But I think, for example, the harm reduction pieces, the scope of work is largely drafted. I think we also have a template because we have contracts through the Maine CDC as well. And I know Mary's been working with the CDC team that's part of DHHS on that to date. We'll need to include, I think we can pay upfront and we can figure out the cadence of those payments, if they're quarterly or monthly or whatever. So that will, I think this new course of action or Plan B will be more closely aligned with the intent of the council than it could have been otherwise if we were going through DHHS contracts. Just because it's, I say this a lot, but because it's my day job and I think about this stuff a lot, we have Mary, which is a contracted resource to the council, and then we have 15 private citizens sitting on this council, so there's no real apparatus yet, or we're getting there, but the oversight and maintenance and management of those contracts is a question in my head, but I do think we have tentatively suggested that DHHS, and we would actually put it in the contract, could lend support to help manage manage those contracts that the Maine Recovery Council would put in place for what I would recommend the syringe service providers as well as the Scatopus Recovery Center, so that there's some infrastructure in place to answer questions, to whether those are technical questions about the contracts we're putting in place or requirements, so everything doesn't fall to the good folks at OAG, basically, and Mary. But I would, if that's not the council's prerogative, then that's fine as well. I think, let me pause there, because then I do want to touch on detox and the SUD treatment, residential treatment beds, and the whole family services funding that was approved in December as well.
So is everyone understanding what happened here? The simple bypass of using the department right now, it can't happen. So now we have to write our own contracts, which again, I think will have a disadvantage, particularly with the SSPs, because it truly will now be flex dollars. They don't have to spend the money and then send the bill. This truly will be flex dollars. The concern that I have expressed with Ben is that we have one staff member that will be managing the contracts. Right now, that's somewhat manageable, but as we move forward and that's what we're doing, is managing our own contracts, we're gonna have to seriously look at our structure and how we do things. But we will explore that. Ella is doing some work in regards to researching some other stuff about whether we could use another agency to do some of the work for us, or the department, or so we have options as to how we're going to be able to manage this amount of money. If you think about the amount of money you have, that's a fairly sizable corporation. And so to manage, what, we're talking 17 million a year, and we have 1 employee and 15 volunteers. And so at some point in time, we're gonna have to talk about structure, about how that works, and whether we'll partner with people or not, but that as we move forward. The big key is to get this 9 million out, and this is the best way. We're working on the contracts. You will see the contract, you will see the language before those go out, the full committee to vote on those. And again, but every time we seem to look at something, there's a detail we see that comes up that we have to explore. So we think that most of these are gonna go okay. The 9 million that we approved, except there's a little bit of glitches Ben's gonna talk about the detox beds and about the recovery center. And so he will talk about how that will work. If you don't have any other questions about that first one.
So we can't use DHS to flow the money through.
Mm-hmm.
But we can use some of your contracts as templates. Will that help the process?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say we can't use DHHS right now. I think the point, I wanted to also advise the council that I am planning, so it's technical financial mechanics on why we can't use funding. The MOU is very specific on the partitioning of these opioid settlement dollars away from any other source of separate funding in the state. So DHHS needs to create specific accounts to actually accept the funds. I am prepared and I've drafted the budget initiatives to put in the governor's supplemental budget to do that. It feels very administrative. I'm literally creating accounts at CDC, OVH, and probably Office of Family Independence, which oversees the CAP agencies, just as the option if the council chooses in the future to use DHHS funding or wanting to amend contracts. Basically, we could move money from the Recovery Council to DHHS, which then we could encumber onto contracts, which we can't today. But we can with legislative approval if they passed these account creations at DHHS. If the council does not choose to use DHHS in the future, the council will sit there unused with $0 in them. If they do, we would vote on it, and then I would work with OAG, and we would transfer the funds for, X dollars, and it would flow over to DHHS, and we would encumber it, and we would have reporting mechanisms back to you all so that we could make sure that everyone's on the same page with how the funding is being spent.
So in other words, they're creating an account, so we can do it. if we choose to do it. It's still our choice. They can't say they want to take money. It has to be the council saying that they authorize the transfer. Any other questions about that?
The DHA doesn't take no money, the legislature appropriates money, and we
That's
just didn't push it out.
Any other questions about that? You want to talk a little bit about the detox beds and the recovery center?
Yeah, I was drawing a distinction between the SSPs and the recovery center, because it seems like those were first in line a little bit, because with the SUD residential treatment beds, I think we need an application process basically to see who is eligible or willing and has the capacity to provide those services in the two counties, Franklin and Androscoggin, I believe, to do that work. So there would be a longer time frame for that. So I think pending legislative approval of those account creations, we could still transfer funding from the Maine Recovery Center Council to DHHS to encumber contracts. Those would be officially DHHS contracts using Maine Recovery Council funding, though. So we have options on what we could do. We could use the DHHS procurement process and we could help the council run its own procurement process, basically. I think it's going to there's pros and cons to all of this, I think. But we have done 3 rounds of, I don't want to rehash the whole detox bed thing, but we've done multiple rounds of capital funding for SUD treatment beds to date, and we actually have 2 more right now open, 2 different procurement processes open right now. But I do think we could still leverage DHHS contracts if that's still the council's prerogative to, for those beds, because we will likely have the legislative approval and the procurement process. The statutory adjournment date for the legislature is April 18th, I believe, so we're not going to finish that procurement process by then, I don't think. We have to write the announcement, we have to give providers at least 30 days to submit applications, and then we have to score the applications and award the contracts and everything.
Gordon?
Ben's done a terrific job to keep this together. I just wanted to emphasize the point that he's made, that the difficulty, the challenges of getting clinical services like beds, whether it's residential or detox, is just enormous. Ben has mentioned 3 procurement things, 2 of them are still open. I can tell you without, saying too much, that we have quite a bit of money available in the state out there that no one's applying.
No one wants it.
That whether the challenge is workforce, or don't have the broad band available to, people are overwhelmed with what they're doing. There's one part of the state, Betsy's quite familiar with, that all I've heard for 5 years is how badly they need detox, and we're having real challenges. So that's why when Ben suggested to me that we'd actually have this language in the budget, likely well before we had successful projects out there in Franklin and Androscoggin, yes, for sure. Now there is some good milestones. Doubling of its beds. A new facility is going to open the last week in March, probably. So, there are Wabanakis beds are going to be open, or they're open, maybe.
They're open. They just announced it today.
That's fantastic. And we went to a grand opening in Prescott for clinical services for the first time, particularly these. So, but this is, it's a real challenge. On the other hand, because you've also got Maine care reimbursement enrollment that takes 60, 90, 120 days. You've got licensing certification with everybody short-staffed. It is an enormous challenge. The recovery centers, we don't license them. We don't certify them. They're recovery community centers. And that one, in Piscataquis County, we'll talk about it later, as part of the program committee report, I hope. That is there is urgency there because there's a building for sale.
Yeah.
And,
At a
and
good
we
price.
can't expect them to, wait months and months and months for us to get this done. So we'll talk about that more in Joe's report, but I just wanted to make that distinction for you that, boy, I wish it was easier to bring beds online, but we worked 5 years at this, and it is really still a real challenge for many of the reasons that you're already familiar with.
So, Ben, anything else? I do know that you missed a portion about how we're going to do the recovery center. So we'll leave that to Joe's report. We think we have a way to fund that easily.
Great.
So, but do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
No, I just want to make it clear, I plan on moving forward with those budget initiatives, hearing no opposition. It's a DHHS specific thing for that, so just FYI on that. And there's a lot of details if we, that's the procurement process that we would run using recovery council funding for detox beds is, there's a lot of, I think we'll handle a lot of the details there in probably the finance committee, but there's questions about, do some of you want to sit on the scoring committee so it's not all DHHS employees scoring the applications that come in for that, and we have to figure that out. But we won't do that now, but there are questions like that that will come back to the council with.
I really have a brief question, and it's probably appropriate that I ask it in open session, and we've not had a chance to address this. In looking ahead, I understand that you'd like the authority to create accounts at OBH, CDC, OFI, but we've also been asked to help the Department of Education with that program. We will, down the road, clearly be working with the Department of Corrections, Department of Public Safety. Why not create accounts in additional places where we anticipate? What's the harm then? If there's no transfer, then it just sits there empty. But why not be a little more broad in that technique?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've raised that, and I think other parts of OHG have been like, what do you mean when you keep saying departments, Ben, and not just DHHS? I think it's a timing issue right now, honestly. I will be lucky to sneak these budget initiatives in right now. There's probably a change package to the governor's budget sometime this spring, so we can think about that. I think it makes sense to, not that we need more process to think about here in this council, but how we engage with other parts of the state as this council is probably warranted, just because I wouldn't, those budget initiatives would show up in their budget, they would need to testify on them before AFA and their policy committees and everything, so it's not something that we can do, it's something that the departments would have to do. I do think DHHS is appropriate because the funding, DHHS is the only department that the council contemplated with its initial funding requests. I don't think any other funding was flowing through other departments from what was already voted on. But it is something I think we should unquestionably do because we just don't have the option to give funding to DOE, for example, right now. And we should at least have the option.
Just a quick follow-up. So these other departments, DOE, DOC, whoever else, will have the same restrictions that you have at DHHS?
Yeah, just very quickly, because again, it's my day job, general fund as a fund type, it's 010. Fund for Healthy Maine, the old tobacco settlements have a different fund type, 024. The opioid settlement dollars has a different fund type, 027. The only account in the state that has a 027 account is at the Maine Recovery Council. No other department has an 027 account, so you can't accept funds from an 027 account without having an 027 account, which is why I'm going to create 3 new 027 accounts at DHHS, and I think public safety and DOE, it makes sense to do this over time for other departments should we be able to do that.
There was also a lot of question about admin and overhead, administrative costs for people who are receiving grant dollars, and Ben's committee is going to do some definition work about administrative costs so that agencies understand when they accept our dollars, what's acceptable overhead costs, and we'll define what we mean by direct and indirect cost, and the finance committee will be developing those definitions so we understand it.
That should be fairly straightforward, I think. Nothing is already quite straightforward for the council, but.
Nothing's been straightforward, Ben, but maybe this will be.
There's three discrete indirect rates that DHHS and the state accept, so I think we can adopt those should we choose. But we'll have that conversation after the finance committee and we'll program.
Any other questions about finance? Courtney? Go ahead.
No,
You got it.
I just wish you birthday.
See, Courtney, take advantage of it, it's your birthday.
I was gonna ask how much money we currently have in the state. See, that's
the
gonna
question I was
defer.
gonna ask, and I was gonna further say, it'd be nice when I know the finance committee's gonna meet, because we don't really get regular updates on, well, how much money has come in, and, I mean, we don't need a lot of detail. I'm a very simple person. How much do we have, and how much would Ben and the finance committee be comfortable with us committing of that? And if we could get that each time the finance committee meets, that would, I think that'd be wonderful.
Without a doubt, I think that's the first thing that should come out of my mouth with a finance committee report, and I will do that. The updates online suggest that there has been no funding delivered to this state through the settlement dollars this calendar year yet. We were delayed, we were supposed to receive funding in late 2023. I don't know if that's still the case. If it is, I think we should get some expectation, get some greater understanding of when the funding's coming, because they are months late.
Yeah, we did, and to some degree that's been, the months late refers to, as I understand it, the 5 new settlements that the state has signed up. The prior sort of, existing settlements are on a regular schedule of end of June, beginning of July, and those are still on schedule. Just a reminder to everybody that the Johnson & Johnson settlement paid front-loaded 5 years worth of payments, so that's going to produce very little in the coming years until 2025, I think it is. But distributors will pay out at the regular rate in, I think it's the beginning of July. A couple of updates are that we expect the 5 new settlements will produce distributions to the state in sort of like late winter, early spring. And we're waiting on one final, what I think of as an administrative step for that to be, a certainty. But all the paperwork is in and done in the courts. We're just waiting on one final piece related to that. But we generally think late winter, early spring is sort of what we're expecting for the 5 new settlements. And then we've learned recently that 2 of the, I haven't got word out about this yet, 2 of the distributors settlement gives them the ability to prepay certain years, and 2 of the distributors have taken that step regarding their 2027 payment. That's going to come in this year, and it's again going to come in sort of late winter or early spring. So I expect there will be a relatively sizable payment that comes in, during that late winter, early spring time period, and then regular payments of a small J&J payment at the end of June, just regular distributor's payment at the beginning of July. And then after this year, things will be, I think, more regularized. If that's an actual word.
Regular? On this committee, I'm not sure. Any other finance questions? Mary?
I don't know if this is a question or a statement, but I appreciate you bringing up the other departments, because if the council doesn't hire a vendor for future funding awards, does the grant and programs committee need to take into consideration which departments we can actually channel funding through? Okay. That's just put for next time. We need to say
Yeah,
that.
I think it's one of those lessons we learned, we didn't know until it happened. So we do need to know that if we consider applications, where they're coming from and how we will do it. And we know right now, until what happens with Ben's recommending, right now we can't. So we have to do the best we can with that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Joe to talk about grants and programming, and you've been busy.
Yes, we've had a busy few months, actually. Mary did a great job sort of providing an overview of all the prevention grants. We had great meetings. That works left of the station, so to speak. And sort of per the 9 million that got appropriated or allocated, next week, 2 weeks, we will hear from hopefully the CAP agencies around the whole families or the family funding. Someone will be coming, right, Mary, from those entities, hopefully. And then we will use the second half of the meeting to talk about the application process, and Miles left the room, he had questions, but Ella and Mary are doing a great job sort of creating an application. And this is maybe an ambitious hope or aspirational, but I'd love to see us be able to come back after that meeting, to the next council meeting, with this is a sort of recommended draft for us to consider for that process. So that's happening. The other thing that I want the group to be able to do is have time every month to talk about what are the priorities from the council. So that it can be bi-directional. And I will work with Pat to sort of keep things, using Greg Payne as an example. Greg would have taken whatever, he'd go to any meeting, he wants to talk about this. But it needs to start here, in my opinion, and I think, Pat, you're in agreement with that. So that's how I hope we can sort of build time into our meetings to talk about the priorities. The other thing that we talked about is just, and Ben kind of touched on this, but just that the grants program committee will not be managing the financial aspects of things. So we'll push that back to the finance committee. It'll always we'll be in alignment, hopefully. But I think it's a very time-consuming conversation, so we'll keep pushing that back, and we have folks that are doing that for us, so we'll move those conversations back. The last thing and Gordon, I'm going to ask you did a great job talking about the Recovery Center in Piscataquis County, and we are hopefully, we'll see what Gordon says or relates today, going to have them at our first March meeting. So Gordon, I'll hand the floor over to you to talk about sort of what that could look like.
Sure. I've had conversations with a number of people about it. There is a nonprofit organization that was formed, that's got its 501c3 status, that's always been expected to operate and own a recovery center. There are 6 people on board. I have a list of the board members. 2 of them are the 2 ladies that you'll remember, 2 women that came and testified, I think very effectively at the public hearing. And they have had a contract, but not under that corporation, to operate this recovery cafe. And I can approach that's not been successful. I had trouble articulating for Mary today even what that meant, but I have documents that support that state contract, which is done in June. The property is still for sale. I've talked to the owner who really purchased it from the Catholic Church in 2017 for the purposes of doing something for substance use. He's still an actively practicing psychologist in the area. Grew up in Sangerville, still lives in Sangerville, but significantly, he's also on the board of the nonprofit foundation that's been organized to operate the residential treatment facility in the town of Washington. And they have a 9-member board, including an accountant who's got good experience, including an attorney, a couple attorneys, one gentleman who lost his daughter, Tessa, and that foundation is now changed its name to the Tessa Libby Foundation. And that property, renovations are done, fire marshal's been in. They will probably start with maybe a recovery center. You have a letter from them asking for $750,000 to help them open it. So to make a long story short, and I've talked to the real estate broker as well, we have 20 or so templated contracts that the state has with recovery centers. So the idea is that Mary and I, and we work with Mike Freisinger, who does our recovery contracts at OBH, we would look at all those contracts. We wouldn't want all the things in this contract, maybe that are in some of them, but it would not really be difficult for us, I think, to do a contract. I realize we're in public session, so I think what I'd like to say is that in that contract, we would want to give them the best chance to be successful over a long period of time. And you graciously put in $350,000. The property's for sale for $190,000. It won't sell for more than that. Maybe it would be sold for less. They're very supportive of this. They're not going to sell it out from under us, but assuming we get this done in a reasonable period of time. So I think the long-term sustainability, we want to make sure that they're getting good consultation and help. And I think the best way to deliver that actually is in partnership with the foundation in the town of Washington. And they're willing to do that, they're interested in helping, and we may even accomplish a joint board meeting of both the boards on February 22nd, which would be shortly before that second program committee meeting. And then I think they would be in a position after that meeting to come in and propose. Mary and I met this morning and discussed, I think it would go best, a proposal to the grants committee, if we proposed a series of questions. And said, here's 6 questions, and we would draw that information from the contracts that we have with 17, 18, 19 existing recovery centers. So I don't think there's many barriers here. We just want to give them as much chance to be successful as possible. And particularly where the Recovery Cafe idea, it simply was not successful. So I think that's all I have to share. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to go to this board meeting, and I've been to the property before in Washington. I've been to the Sangerville property, and I don't think there's any really barriers. You've committed the money, and now that we know we're going to do our own direct contracting, it's one company. And we've got lots of templated contracts to draw from. I think it's expected that probably I even thought about, which nonprofit should be the owner of the property. But I think we have to leave that to a local decision. I mean, I think they formed a nonprofit, and there's some issues about independence, and I get that, but they're willing to accept help, and there is an excellent consultant associated with the Washington project who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner who was the director of Bella's House when it was operating. I think Pat had talked to him, maybe. She's excellent, and she's providing consulting advice for Washington because she opened Bella's House from scratch, licenses, Maine care reimbursement, joint commission. She did a wonderful job there. It's a shame that Bella's House is not operating today, but it will operate again, in my opinion, under new ownership at some point. So that's what and she's willing to also consult with the group in Piscataqua to help make sure that they have the best chance to have a successful recovery center.
And if I'm not mistaken, when we allocated that funding, we said that they could spend it on buying the property plus staffing.
They will they will need, I mean, I don't think we put any, I mean,
We didn't put any-
I'd have to look at the motion, but I mean, they should be able to buy it. They'll have to do some renovations in it. And they'll need some staffing but that's enough to at least get them started maybe the first year. And like all our centers, Courtney and I, at her birthday luncheon, we discussed the fact there is no long-term plan for the sustainability of these 20 to 22 recovery centers. There's a bill in the legislature that would direct funds from the candidates to, it's LD
1714.
1714, and that's presently on the appropriations table. So, I mean, that's one possibility, but we all have concern about how do we keep all these wonderful places going, and that's just an issue for the future. But you've committed to this one, and I'm very grateful, and they are too.
Brittany?
Just to build on what Gordon just said, I think I remember, and I would be interested to hear the motion, but I do think I remember that $350,000 was for buying the building and for staffing, but over the course of 2 years.
Yeah, it's 2 years.
2 years,
The motion
right?
says to provide $350,000 in year one funding to open up a new recovery community center in Scottsbluff County, which includes funding for operating and acquisition of the building.
Okay.
But you guys did specify that you wouldn't make them spend it and report on it all in 1 year, that they can
Yeah.
spend it over the course of 2 years, but that you wanted to give them all the funding.
So like
in year one.
they have if the building is hypothetically $190,000, they would have $160,000 left over
That they can spend.
that they can spend $80,000 a year for staffing for 2 years. That was my intention when I included 100 extra money for staffing, was to get them through 2 years of staffing.
Yes.
Because somewhere, if you look at the chart says over 2 years.
Yeah.
And evidently the motion did, but that, I think that was everyone's understanding.
Yeah.
Because,
Sorry, I know I voted on this, but I'm gonna say it. I think the reality is that's gonna be a real lift for them to make that stretch over 2 years. So I think you even said this, Courtney, at the meeting, like yesterday's meeting or one of the meetings, like, what's gonna be the process for people needing to come back to us? What it does, and I love what Gordon just laid out for us, and did a great job yesterday. I feel very informed. It's the right way to go. But what's our openness to, going, when they come back and say there's a gap, and they can demonstrate it in their budget. So
Yeah, I think it's a broader conversation
totally.
about continuing to support our partners and leveling it down over time, as our money levels down over time.
Yeah.
Anyways, so.
and I think, well, some of them did, some didn't. I know that, and I can only speak to the one that I'm the most familiar with, and that's the barn. I mean, the barn started out 100% volunteers, which, and then it just got to be near impossible. You needed a full-time director there. And we're able to, thank the governor and Gordon, to be able to get the money for them to be able to hire. Again, for most part, the peer recovery centers are volunteer-based. They depend a great deal on their volunteers, but you do need leadership in the building. You do need, people to coordinate efforts in order to get it all done, because it gets complicated. So hopefully, the Scottsbluff County will grow and figure that out and end up, hopefully with funding the way the other recovery centers are. But Gordon's right. The recovery centers most of them don't have long-range plans if the state ever pulled out.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to talk that much. There are other recovery community centers, particularly the small ones, like Save a Life. I'm not making them up for this, but Save a Life right now, they don't have any heat. Their heater is broken, and they're covering themselves in blankets and serving our community and living on hopes and dreams and shoestring budgets. So there are still other recovery community centers that are desperate for funding as well.
Yep, Save a Life is one of them. I think they just put on their board a couple of good people that hopefully will help them with some donations on donation work.
Well, just so that you have the complete picture, remember that they are one of the 22 applications that are being scored at the Office of Behavioral Health to determine contracts for the next 2 years, and the existing contracts have been extended to like September, but a number of those centers are only getting $50,000. So, but again, many of these places started as a storefront with volunteers. They are all different. They won't all survive, but our goal was to help anybody in a community that wanted to have a recovery community center. We've had some move from one community to another, Food Bay Harbor to Newcastle. But we've not had any, somebody might correct me, but I don't think we've had any that have actually shut down. But the other thing to know is that the Acadia Family Center is not, that you have a letter from, in Southwest Harbor. They were an existing organization, they provided treatment, and then they revamped, they got all the treatment, they've got a beautiful building, they have a little endowment, and I've been with them a few times, and they are writing to you, but we actually have money set aside for that in the OPH budget from the Prevention Treatment Fund. There was one more that we could do for $50,000. So I'm not saying that's the whole picture. That's why 22 applications being scored. Piscataquis County, which would be new, and the Recovery Acadia Family Center, it would be the second recovery center in Hancock County, but everybody thinks the island would support its own recovery center. So that's the complete picture. I don't know going forward, Piscataquis, I don't even know that if you need a vote or anything. We're gonna, I think the Grants Committee already has said they'd like to have a presentation at the March meeting on how this nonprofit would organize this. We'll help them with that, and we've kind of described how we're intending to proceed. So you tell me if we need a motion, but that's the full picture of what we want to do to help Piscataquis County.
I think the motion was made that we put a recovery center in Piscataquis County. I think that's enough. And again, the contract language, of course, will come before because it's new, the full committee will look at contract language, that kind of thing. But you don't need a vote in moving that, I don't believe, forward.
We did, it is a sole source, but as we discussed in the program, at this point, virtually all our contracts are really sole source, because of limited eligibility, SSP, we said 17 locations. And we've been advised by legal counsel that the council can make a decision to sole source. And I was preparing to put it out there to Piscataquis County and have an RFA when Bruce and others said, no, that wasn't our intent. We wanted to support this group. And I'm excited the way it's developed, and we're going to help them make it successful.
And it is a group. It's not, again, they're a new 501(c), but they are not a new group. They have been at this. I was in meetings with them before I retired, and I can't remember how many years I retired. And I lived there in the summertime, so I would attend some of their meetings. So they've been at this for a long time, and so they know what they want. And so this is their opportunity. And if you look at data, you'll see where the gaps are in Piscataquis County. They're high risk. They don't have a lot of treatment available to them other than driving to Bangor. And so this gives them an opportunity to have a recovery center to increase their recovery coaching piece. And again, and peer recovery centers are just, they're unique. I remember joining the board at the barn for the first time before they had staff, and I said I'd be the treasurer. I've never sat at a board and been a treasurer where I actually wrote all the bills. I thought, what do you mean I have to pay all the bills? I thought I just reported out. No, I literally had the checkbook. I was writing the checks. I was paying the bills. So they start out as grassroots organizations and blossomed and done a remarkable work throughout the state. And I know that Save a Life, Barbara Sanborn, I think, is now currently working with them, trying to help them with fundraising for some stuff. So it's a good good use of funding. Anything else on the
I would
program?
just say like the next council meeting in March, there will be a lot of this work will be moving forward. And I even think the recovery center will be working on the contract simultaneously so that we won't hold it up yet another month. We want to hear from them. We will, according to the questions you just articulated, I think, well, we can ask them to be prepared to respond to a few questions, but I think we'll have moved a lot by the March meeting. And that's it for me.
So this really is a first where we actually have time. If my clock is right, I'm like, well, there was a request, I believe, from Liz, who wanted to spend some time talking about future meetings and how we could add to our meetings. And you want to say more, Liz?
I just wanted to have a place for folks to share agenda items, since they can't be shared via email, they have to be in a public forum. I just want to have a standing thing so that, because I guess what I found is that you have so graciously you've chosen to be the chair, we voted for you to be the chair, I appreciate that. And I find that you set the agenda, and so having the group be able to set the agenda to have our, when we have things like who's gonna come speak, that we have the chance to be able to do that. So that's all I'm asking for. I think I've said my parts on having us have a conversation about the schools and how we're gonna move forward with that. And having someone from the Wabanaki Nation come, or Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness come and speak to us.
And sort of,
Paul?
Yeah, I'd like a chance to speak. One of our big priorities is low barrier MOUD. And I'd like to speak about the 1,000 Lives campaign from the Maine Medical Association, which I think is a really low-hanging fruit to make a huge impact in the state of Maine.
I think that would be great. I'd love to hear some more about that. That would be great.
I'm sorry, being rude. One of this is just, as Ben was speaking, I had this thought, and I was at the Eggs and Issues in Portland. Today's Eggs and Issues was around the homeless situation, and it was very good, but I set it up for the Maine Community Foundation. And I just have this, as Ben was talking about, who are we to the United Ways? Who are we to the foundations of Maine? How can we partner with them? How can we match money? They have their thumb. You talk about data. They know. 10 United Ways have the thumb on the pulse of the whole state.
Yeah.
So and I think it would behoove us maybe in your spare time, Mary, once they make awards, which we're in that season, looking at what they fund and how we look at that, let them do the work and then let us have, look at some of those. But the foundations also really, they have priorities, they have processes. I just think it'd be a great way to sort of come together to be bold around an initiative that they've committed to as well. So just a thought I've had only today, but Ben sort of made it concrete in my head. So I think that might be worth a conversation. And maybe it's not in the next 3 months, but in the year ahead, it's probably a worthwhile discussion. Okay.
I just want to make one clarification. So you're talking more about not so much partnering with them to help us allot our money. You want them to come to tell us what they're currently funding in regards to this.
Yeah, and I just showed I think it's a generative conversation about United Ways, what they're funding, what's important to them. Our X number of foundations in Maine, and we can pull that.
They have all that data.
All that data is available. So I think it might be half an hour conversation. It might go nowhere, but I just think they're out there trying to move the needle.
Correct.
And who are we to each other, and how can we be mutually beneficial? So that's not, I got nothing more than that.
Just briefly, let me remind the council that the council has a similar duty regarding the subdivisions. They get their own opioid spending as well. And there's, I think, overlapping but separate conversations. And I to the extent you're doing one, makes sense to do the other as well.
So inviting municipalities or
representatives of.
representatives of municipalities.
And I think Mary's collecting information.
Mary's collecting
and so on.
information.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
for example, in Coucnil County, are they aware of the need for the resource center application? What's the county's role in that, if any, and so on?
And recently I've learned that a few of them are giving funding to the county jails for medication-assisted treatment. So it'd be interesting to know who's doing that and what's the gaps in that.
And Pat, part two to your question, sorry to be rude, when you're asked about using their apparatus, I think that's also, could they help us? I think, yes, that would be a good exploration. I think Maine Community Foundation, you may have mentioned, that feels familiar.
Yeah,
They might be actually thinking that way as a foundation. So I don't know, but I think, yes, that's worth exploring, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're sort of, Ella's doing some research for us to ask about different organizations we may be able to partner with, because I think about simple things and then they pick up my mind. So I think of oh, well, we have an application process. Will it be online? Who's going to design that? How does that, so I know, for instance, again, I can only go from my experience. I'm not saying you have to use them, but I knew the United Way. I'm a grant reviewer for the United Way. I click a button, I sit in my home, I can read the application, I score it, it all tabulates, I can hit the submit button and off it goes. We don't have that process. Currently now, if we opened up applications, we would have to hand read every one of them and find an Excel spreadsheet and score that out somehow. So again, these are little things we don't think of, but if we partnered with somebody that already did that, again, like the Maine Community Foundation or other foundations like that, because we need to have, I think that I can share with you, I think you would all agree, not even has the process started yet, but we're already getting a great deal of people asking. I can't even imagine when we open that floodgate, how many people are going to apply for these funds? And there are going to be some great programs in there, well-deserved, and we have to figure out a way to read them, score them, look at where we are geographically, where are we with priorities. It's a complicated thing. I don't mean that it's not doable. I just think, there's details that we have to think about before we press that application process and then all of a sudden find ourselves flooded with hundreds and hundreds of applications. Bruce, Gordon, Courtney.
I just want to, Joe, I really like your suggestion about the foundations and finding out what they're doing, even if we're not going to partner with them, just to actually know how this all fits into the bigger picture. And then the other thing is municipalities. I think that's something a few of us have been talking about since the first day that we met. What are the municipalities doing? And just because it's a top of mind conversation, someone was talking to me today saying, there are communities that are waiting for this council to make some decisions about what we're doing. So, just bringing forward municipalities that already have an idea about how they're going to spend the money, that will be helpful. But what about those municipalities that they just don't have a clue about how they want to spend the money? How do we approach that?
Yep. I think so. We can be the convener. We can help with that.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 3 or 4 of those things together. Probably the most important thing to know is that I meet every 3 months with private philanthropy in Maine that's focused on substance use disorders. It's brought together at the behest of the Maine Health Access Foundation, and it includes foundations that are well known to you, Bingham, Better, J.T. Gorman, Maine Community Foundation. Now we're doing more too with the Goodman Router Foundation. Glenn Cummings is leading. So it would be, and the United Way agency, the combined one that York and Cumberland is part of that group. And I've only listed about half of them. And these are the ones that, I think at some time in 2024, we should invite them in. They really want to align their spending, which is not millions. they're really helpful. If you have a need for 10,000 or 50,000, they're really helpful. And they funded Maine Community Foundation, our pilot recovery friendly worksite initiative in Washington County, for instance. So they're wonderful people. You'd enjoy getting to know them, and I think we should invite them in for an informational session on what are their interests, what are our interests, and where do they align. I also want, because we do have a little time today, we haven't had any discussion about data and evaluation and all of that. And I think the one thing I'm thinking about is Attorney General tries contract, or it's probably not signed yet, with the Catherine Cutler Institute that he talked to the legislature about. Brendan may know more about it, but I know, and that was primarily, as I understand it, it was really tied into the 39 subdivision to help them know what they could spend money on and to do some of that work. And they're well suited to do it. They're down at the University of Southern Maine. We've worked with a number of their researchers on Versa grants and other things. So it's time to, we only have various help. It's time, I think, if that contract gets signed, to see how they could help us. And then you're right about the applications and the grant, but there's some simple things that we can do. For instance, I wouldn't invite full proposals. I'd invite one-page concept papers on the following topics, and then we can read them and decide the ones that we might ask the people to invest in developing a whole proposal. We've talked before how the small nonprofit can completely removed from the process because they don't have CPAs, they don't have accountants, they don't have grant writers, and yet they do some of the most innovative and effective work in our communities. So I don't think it's right to have a completely open process that, okay, yeah, we got this money, send in your proposal. It's got to be linked to the remediation document, and we ought to give them some guidance to say, well, we got $3 million for secondary prevention. We want to work with the adolescent population. Give them some direction, but don't prescribe it. Let's see what they've got. And we can do this. It might get so overwhelming, that we have to run to a grant making organization and have them help. But the last thing I'll say.
But you're right, I think we do have to focus, we can't use it.
Absolutely.
We do have to, as a council, focus in on a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact, like we want detox beds, but it can be about, narrow it in a little, so people's applications can be following the goals or the priorities of the council.
And they have to have some idea whether we're thinking of $10,000 or $50,000 or $500,000. But the last thing I was going to say is that the beauty of our democracy is that there's 50 states doing this. And as I understand it, Mary, through Brendan's contacts, gets an opportunity, I think every month, to talk with people who are doing what Mary's doing. And so some state where we've taken a look at this, you might have seen the article in the Boston Globe this week that was very critical of the lack of spending by their municipalities. The city of Boston getting more than $1 million a year, hasn't spent. The state, I think, is kind of a leader in pushing out their money. But everybody's struggling with this, but we can look at the states that we think have the best application process and steal it from them. So I've said too much, but I wanted to kind of link that together because I think the data, Catherine Cutler piece, all that's going to eventually be really important to us.
Courtney, thank you, Gordon. Courtney?
Thanks, Pat. I want to say that I agree with Gordon. I like the idea of an application process that, these are made up numbers, please do not quote me on this, $1 million for prevention, $1 million for recovery, $1 million for treatment, $1 million for harm reduction, etc. And then allowing people to propose in a one-pager what they would like to do. And I agree, Pat, it is gonna be a heavy lift to go through all of those, and also it's the role of the council to do that.
Yep.
And I know you know this, Pat, I'm not saying this because you don't know this, then we're gonna have to do it in public. We can't have a system at home where we're working on it late at night. At least that's my understanding, Brendan, that we need to do it all in public.
I think if you're, so you haven't quite gotten down the road, and obviously this is now kind of an open question. You know, I don't want to speculate on this
TBD.
stuff. Yeah.
Maybe we have to do it in
Can
public.
you check on that, because I've never been involved in a grant process that, in reviewing the grants that became public, the results, or if you're appealing it, you certainly can review the notes and stuff, but
Yeah, I mean,
I've never.
in general, I think my suggestion to the council about FOA is, you know, to the extent, like, you all go home and work on the Recovery Council work, that, you know, by yourselves at home in your own time. There's nothing wrong with that.
So maybe we could have a score sheet at home and we all come to the
And then you
table
come
with our
together and
scores and we
think, you know,
figure
if
out a
you-
mathematical equation or.
If the score sheet is
something.
developed publicly, and then, you know, everybody knows what that is, and then you all go home with the work and you do it yourselves. You know, at the moment, I
No
don't.
cheating on the test, y'all.
I don't.
This is not an open.
Some easy
No, not
scores.
for Brad.
How did you score? You know, I've served on grant committees, and that's what they did. Everyone scored separately, and then they had a spreadsheet. And you could see, they wouldn't specify who was high or low, but they'd throw high score, low score, and then they'd discuss it. It's actually a fair process, because in the discussion, you have an ability to change your score. So in the discussion, somebody pointed out something you missed, you can say, oh, I didn't realize that. No, you know what, I'm gonna score that a little higher. So you had that opportunity to score it higher, but it was in a public session with everybody there.
So that's actually not what,
Yeah.
I have a different topic that I wanted to raise, and I don't know if we're done on this topic, but, okay. So I think this is probably a governance committee, conversation, and probably doesn't need to be immediate either. But I have been thinking about the way that the terms are set up for the council, for a couple different reasons. One, we all have to be reappointed in November, I think. And two, we all can only serve for a total of 4 years. And if we are all reappointed in November, then all of us are going to be unappointed 2 years from then. And there will be a complete turnover of this council, which is for me, for like a sustainability, like in knowledge, like institutional knowledge, like that's a pretty terrifying, and I don't know that anybody contemplated that while we were working on the MOU or the document, or I don't know that anyone thought of that.
I always, when I first started, I thought it was odd, because the most time when you have a startup, they have that first couple years, you had a 1-year term, you had a 2-year, so they would stagger that. Where this, I thought the same thing. I looked and I thought, wow, in 2 years, you could have a whole new council if you're all not reappointed. All of us aren't. Or if we all stay for the 4 years, then again, there's another all.
Right, so I've spent a little too much time thinking about this, so I've thought up 3 kind of avenues to the problem. One, you do nothing. Everybody is reappointed in November. We all serve for 4 years of a total term. We all leave in 2 years from November. That's option 1. Option 2 is that some people on this council either voluntarily, or I would prefer to not voluntarily, are not reappointed in November, and we get a mix of new people with the elder council members. I'm doing that's not a great way to say that. With the longer terming, the veteran council members, so you get a mix, right? Or option 3, you fix the MOU or the statute. I don't know what the solution to that is. Like, I've only gotten down the path of options. I don't like option 1. I don't like the idea of this council completely turning over. I don't think that's a responsible way to govern. So.
So you have to change the MOU.
Well,
You can't change
my
the
question
MOU.
to Brendan, well, you
Good.
can, but it's just not easily done, I think. Well, would we, to create staggered terms in the bylaw, would we have to change both the MOU, which is, I understand, also requires the permission of the subdivision and stuff maybe, or the statute, or both?
I could look at that, but at least the MOU.
And that's much more difficult than changing the statute.
You see, I'm looking at it now.
There's a statute that, and you have the.
I mean, the statute creates, 4 additional members, so again, I would want to look at it, but it's possible we would need to change that also.
Yeah, I don't need a solution today, but just like something for everybody to consider, as we think about.
I always thought it was odd that they didn't stagger.
So, sorry.
Go ahead, Brendan.
Well, just one sort of background contextual point is that the continuity, to the extent there's continuity, there at least will be continuity from the Attorney General's office. And the work that this, class of the council and potentially the next class, the next 2 years, the pain that you all are going through is to set up the structures and the processes that you would be handing to the next council, even if it's completely new members. Now, as you all know, they can take that and say thank you and put it on the shelf and do something totally different. But at a minimum, you will have set up structures that that next group can run with much more quickly and easily than you have been able to. You are building the plane as you're flying it. It's very difficult, and the next group ideally would not have that burden.
I think I would land some.
No, I'm actually,
No. Okay. I don't know, there's a lot to think about around this. I think right now I land somewhere in the second strategy where.
But it is governance question.
Yeah.
To some degree, like, you are creating the.
Statues.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if I want to be messing around with statues.
The work that you all do and the practices you are deciding to follow now will be creating, the precedent for the next group, even the soft sort of practices. So for example, all this discussion around an application, to the extent the last 4 months of 2023, this group spent a ton of time working on trying to identify what the problem was in Maine. You spent a lot of time looking at data, listening to Dr. Johnson, working really hard to use that data to identify what your priorities are. And to the extent you come up with an application, it would, make sense to me to use that work to inform your application. And just, for example, to say, we want to see applications on projects that are tailored to our priorities, which are derived from the work we did to identify the problem in Maine. That creates that kind of soft precedent that this group can carry forward, and ideally, the next council can see that that was how you did things. That can be powerful. And just briefly, well, I'm sorry.
Brief, I want to hear
it. One thing, the process of the process of applications, then there's also the post-contracting work that needs to happen. We talked earlier about using templates to create contracts, and there was some discussion around the idea that there's post-contracting work that needs to be done. You will also be creating this sort of precedent of how that work gets done. And so to Ben's point earlier, just to say it out loud and be clear, while the work right now is to be creating the Recovery Council contracts directly to get that money directly out the door, the Attorney General's office doesn't, as I think have a similar structure as exists at DHHS to manage contracts, and I don't anticipate that we will. And so there will be work needed to, and as Pat's talked reference to research Ella's doing, there will be work needed to put in place, a way to manage that. And Ben's talked a little bit about that and so on. So all of that work will be work that the next council can run with.
Bruce and Liz and then Bruce, but I have a quick question for Gordon. Gordon, in the Governor's Commission for Substance Use, do those turn over at the same time?
No, I'm pretty sure that, well, I can look at that. She has referencing the what we now call the Substance Use Disorder Services Commission, SUBSE.
But they're all appointed.
They're all appointed, I think, by the governor, and they serve a fixed term. But I think some of them are by position, but I think there's, well, I'm not sure, but I'll.
They did
I
at one point, I
can
don't know.
easily share the answer with you by statute, but I think I really think they're staggered.
Okay, thank you. Liz, then Bruce.
Mine is going back to something Gordon said earlier, so Bruce, if it's on this topic, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just, and this is just me saying this is a we decision, obviously, but there, in government, we have governors that come on that are coming in cold, presidents, all kind, and there's a transition team, there's a transition group. The other thing is that we were all appointed to this committee, 5-6 months ahead of time, and so those folks are already going to be determined. And can't there be a way to have a transition group from that group that's coming in, that one, looks at a lot of the videos, looks at the notes, looks at the contracts, comes to meetings, pays attention to what's going on, a transition team that's getting that team ready for coming into this council?
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, is remember, we're inventing this wheel. So part of what we can do in our procedures is develop a transition team.
I mean,
in the plan.
The precedent has been set. I mean, we do this in our structure of government all the time. But there has to be a transition.
Yeah.
There has to be a transition.
Yeah, thank you. Liz?
I just wanted to let everybody know that, to your point, Gordon, of you being on that group with the funders, they have just asked me to come to speak to them about some, like a public health perspective on some of the work that we're doing at the local level, and also some of the things that just a conversation about what could they be doing as funders that supplements some of the work that's happening around at the local level and here. So it's a very informal conversation. They asked me to come and do some education, and then, so I just wanted to be clear about that I'm actually, and this just happened actually yesterday. So I'm not going on behalf of the MRC. I said very clearly, I can say what my public health perspective is and what we're doing at the local level, so I'm not representing us in any way.
And everything you say to them is something that's already public knowledge. It's already on the website, it's already been recorded, so you're just passing on information that's already public info. I think it's great. I think it's great to put that, you to be out there and tell the work that you're doing with the committee is great. I love it.
This is a completely, maybe it kind of follows on what Liz is talking about, but, and maybe this is for Ben and for Brandon, so the municipalities are able to just kind of write checks, right? Are they?
I think you should, yeah.
Maybe I could just say, go ahead.
I want you to answer, if you can answer that.
Yeah.
So they're able to just write checks. So let's say we partner with a municipality, some of the funding from here, we think of like a little bit bigger project. And we say, okay, you have the mechanism to pay this out. Can this council give them the additional funds? Let's say it's $500,000 each, boom. And then they're the ones who actually distribute the funds?
As long as
to make that process easier?
As long as you have a contract that they agree to do whatever
Yeah,
in the MOU.
well, assuming there's a contract.
Correct, so, yeah, unless Ben finds
The way that I would
something, seems
start it-
logical to me.
Maybe I'm just thinking it too simplistic.
The Maine Recovery Council has no restrictions on spending funds. We can do whatever we want with the dollars. You know, we have to push it out through the state accounting system, so vendors are gonna have to be in that system to actually get paid. But, 'cause there's no other way to distribute the funds, unless we're doing paper checks. So we could, yeah, and we have limited ability to transfer funds. So.
So then are you gonna keep a checkbook and give it a cat then?
Oh, no, I'm not signing that.
So I'll just say at the local level, like for us, like so at Cumberland County, we take in federal dollars, we take in state dollars, and we do have on times, we do subawards to local organizations. And we follow federal guidelines around how to oversee those subaward. When we're doing this opioid settlement funds, we did decide through an assessment process that was then voted on by the commissioners, that we would use part of the money to fund our behavioral public health manager, who's doing a whole bunch of coordination work and a whole bunch of other things. I can tell you about that. We're doing an RFP process and we're doing some prevention work where we're doing deeper community engagement to figure out what to do with the amount we've set aside for prevention. So in our RFP, we're coming up with a whole process for doing that. Our Cumberland County is, the largest county. We have some level of infrastructure to do that. Not all of these municipalities that are much smaller have that ability to sort of oversee this. So we actually went around just finding out who's doing what in Cumberland County, municipal health, and asked them, what are you doing and do you need any support? We'll be happy to support you, not financially, but or could be financial if you need that, but we want to support you with how to come up, what's your process and how are you going to track it and how are you going to make sure you're sending back the right reporting on how you spend the funds and making sure you're doing that funds within the MOU. And one of the municipalities said, great, we'd actually like to give you our money. It's only $3,000. We don't know how to use it. $3,000 is hard for us to manage. Will you take it and add it to yours and put it in with your work? And we said yes. So I think that many of them are just putting the money into strategies that they want to do within the municipality. And a few counties have decided to put out an RFP process. I think some maybe you two want to comment. I don't know that people will be like, sure, give us the money and we'll pass it through. They may or may not. I'm not sure. It's sort of 6 of one, half dozen of another, because you're still left with, wanting to make sure that the money goes to the things that we think it should go to.
Yeah, I know that there's some small towns around Bangor that have approached Bangor saying, this is so little money, this is for us. Tell us what you're doing and we'll throw ours into yours.
Yeah.
Because it just made sense for them, because they couldn't have any impact with the little bit of money that they got.
Right.
But they knew if and again, the counties, their town, was right beside Bangor and figured their community would benefit from whatever Bangor was doing and did that.
And I'm sorry to be so naive about this and just bring up the question.
we're all learning.
But at the same time, I also feel like if there's a municipality or like you're talking about a group of towns in the county and whatever that have determined something that they'd like to do, and we feel like, oh, that's a good project to kind of put some funding into, doesn't that feel better? It feels better to me personally that this local area has made a decision about where they think the funding should go. And if they need a little bit more assistance or a little bit more help from the council, that we do that. Anyway.
I think it's a good suggestion.
Thanks.
Thank you. Todd, did you?
Well, no, I was just gonna say that the short answer is I think it's pretty easy for the counties and the municipalities to write a check, maybe much easier than the state.
Yeah.
That was part of the question too.
We don't have a checkbook, that's a problem.
So, I mean, there's a process obviously, but it's fairly, fairly easy.
You just put it in the
It's-
warrant and then have to sign, right?
I will just say, a lot of the restrictions that are imposed on the state come from the federal government and federal reporting requirements. We get a lot of, the CDC, that's 85% of its funding from the feds. the federal requirements, and they will claw back the funding if we don't follow those requirements. I'm not saying the state doesn't have its own special procedures, but those are imposed on us, and I think the closer you get to the local level, the further away you get from federal funding.
Right, yeah. I mean, they don't have those procedures.
Well, and with this funding, the municipalities don't have the same reporting requirements that we do.
No.
The transparency around it, and other states have, the states have sent money to the municipalities to support their local initiatives, which is great, and then also they've asked them for limited reporting, and the state's then able to have that data, and it can, support the dashboard or whatever else they need to know. So it's kind of a nice incentive system, and it allows the money to go where it needs to go. So just something to keep in mind.
Courtney, I have another weird governance thing, and I, again, probably don't.
She's getting ready for law school.
I really do. I think a lot about process and government and what's fair and what's ethical and all that. We just voted 9 committee members into the grants committee, which is A, lot, and B, a quorum of the grant. So like if the grants committee votes unanimously on something, you pretty much just voted to fund something.
Yeah.
Because we need 9 to fund something. So again, I don't know if we want to do anything about that, but that's a lot.
I thought about that.
Can you explain that again, please?
So there's 15 council members at this level.
Correct.
You need 9 votes to pass anything because we are a body that determines things through hopefully a unanimous consensus, but in the case of a failed unanimous consensus, we must meet 2/5 of the body.
Correct.
And 2/5 of 15 is 9. 3/5. 3/5, sorry, excuse me, let the record show it's 3/5. 3/5 of 15 is 9. So you need 9 votes to pass anything in this committee, in this council. And we just appointed 9 people to the grants committee. So if the grants committee makes a recommendation unanimously, you pretty much just funded something.
Well, that'll streamline it. I like it.
Everybody shows up.
Well, what it shows that they have power over putting things through that they want without,
So the 6 of us that's not on the grants committee,
Well, you're on the grants.
just saying.
No, because there was already 9 on there.
Okay.
That wouldn't appoint me.
It's a good point, but I'll just share why it's of no concern to me. Number one, it's a reflection of how much interest there is in this, among these council members, of that critical piece of our work. Number two, I might well vote something in the grants committee, then when I hear the discussion at the full council meeting, might choose to. So, that's all.
That's fine, I just wanted to raise it.
As the current chair, I'm very aware of that too, and I think that we haven't had that many votes. I hear what you're saying, but I think I'm sitting here thinking sort of the way my board behaves. And it's exactly what you said, Gordon, at a committee meeting, they may vote, and they only vote to recommend to the full board. So everything's just a recommendation back to the full board. You're like, okay, I got the votes, and then they go to the board meeting and you don't have the vote. So, I mean, we could be all in sync and do what you're saying, I don't know. I think we can maybe think about checks and balances that, that prevent that.
I'm not overly attached to this one, I just wanted to raise it for consideration that technically you do have a voting block of 9 in the grant committee.
And I would say that might be something that's tackled next year, like the other, the other.
Maybe limits on.
Or we can, if it's a concern, we can fix it now. I mean, it's easy to fix. Because I can pull out. And then I can join you at any time I want. There's no reason anybody can't join any committee meeting they want, they just don't have a vote. So I could easily pull myself off, and then you'd have 8, and then I could attend.
Well, Pat, I think that might also talk to us trying to take some things off your plate. Like I'm on the finance committee and Bruce is on the grants committee.
That's why I deliberately put you there and him there, so if I couldn't, the 2 of you would be there, that would skip.
Yeah, so again, not
Yeah.
a big deal.
Well, it is.
Baby lawyer over here.
It is and it isn't. So we like to sit and look around the room and we're gaining this trust of each other and we see the ethics that are before us. But, that has changed. And when membership changes, it changes. And you never know. And so as much as you don't like to have those thoughts, you have to have them. It's just like, that's why we're we audit things. That's why we go over things. That's why we have bylaws and rules. We'd like to think, everyone would behave in a respectable manner, and it doesn't always happen. And so you have rules in place for those, to protect yourself for those reasons.
So maybe just put on a governance committee meeting, a discussion about, do we limit committees to 8 people?
Yep.
And also, Betsy says no, which we can talk about.
Yeah, I think it's a good conversation.
Well, per Robert's rules, are you not
7
ex
people.
officio on everything? Like usually at a board, you have the chair of a board is usually ex officio on every committee.
Yeah.
That just means maybe you can't vote, but I don't think ex officio means you can't vote though. Usually, but it is sort of, I know.
Ex officio, you can't, I don't think you have a vote.
Okay, so if she was just ex officio on all the, because you go to all the meetings, that would that would get us back to 8.
Yeah, so term limits
that's it.
and committees for whenever the governance committee meets again.
But again, I think it's a great conversation. Again, we're building this plane, and we don't want to be like Alaskan Airlines with the few bolts missing. We want to be able to have those in place. So
we do want to be like Spirit Airlines, though. Do we have Narcan in the building?
We do? Excellent. What was I watching on TV? Something with Narcan. So my husband totally does not get my life. Although we've been married for 52 years. He says, "What are they doing?" I said, "Oh, that's Narcan."
I carry Narcan.
That's like,
I carry Narcan in my.
I know it's in
Shingle. Shingle. All right. Any other business to come before this meeting? I can't believe this. I think this is a first for us. We're actually ending early. So if I'm not mistaken, at our next meeting, I just want to make sure, we're going to try to have somebody here to talk about Freedom of Information Act. We'll hopefully get Scott back to talk about the prevention work group. We're going to have Greg come, and there was something else. No, I think that was it, plus the other work that we're doing. All right. Oh, the 1,000 Lives. We'll probably put them on, let's put them on April.
But it's me.
Oh, it's you?
Yeah, I can.
Excellent, we're gonna put you on April then.
Get anyone in here.
I don't need to get anybody, that's you. All right, excellent, Paul. So we may, let me look at the agenda and see what else is on there. So if one of those speakers can't come in March, we'll put you in the March meeting. Other than that, we'll go with April. Okay, all right, if there's no other business before this meeting, I call it adjourned. Thank you very much.